Representative Plummer, and members of the committee. My name is Denny Galaudette, and I'm speaking in support of LD1453. I'm a resident of Cumberland, Maine. I'm a retired school superintendent, having served in that capacity in Richmond, Maine for 7 years until 2006. Before that, I was CEO of Casco Northern Bank, the largest statewide bank in Maine prior to interstate banking. I'm currently treasurer of St. Luke's Cathedral in Portland at a volunteer position. As I will discuss, each of these work experiences has been very helpful to me in evaluating this LD. Lastly, I might mention that on a personal note, I do not use marijuana myself, nor do I condone its use except for medical purposes. In Cumberland, I manage a small woodlot, and while I'm not a representative that belongs to me, I do get out about 10 cords of wood every year, and very frequently I will hang up a tree, which means the tree comes down only part way and it's stuck in the branches. And this is a dangerous situation for a small woodlot owner. Now the way to get out of this is not to crank up ever more in my tractor skidding winch, because that doesn't work. The way to get out of it is to attack from a different angle by running the cable to a snatch block and pulling away from a different angle. That's how to solve that problem. And I mentioned, draw this analogy from the Maine woods, because I believe very strongly that our current effort to control marijuana is failing the war on drugs, and we need a new approach. And I think the new angle could be this LD, or something very much like it. So this legalization approach makes sense to me as a former school superintendent. In Richmond, I was blessed with very strong partnerships with very competent police and fire departments. Working together, we took great pride in making the Richmond schools safe for kids, and I believe we did that. For example, I never had to discipline a student for bringing drugs to school. I never had a bomb scare. The students and the parents strongly supported this culture and would often give me, the chiefs, a heads up when one or more kids would get themselves into trouble. Yet the chiefs and I often lamented the easy access outside the school of tobacco and drugs. It was everywhere in Richmond. And these trends continue. Maine's study, the 2009 Integrated Health Study, shows that these trends continue, very ubiquitous. Now I picked 11th graders because they're not quite 18, so they have a little different relationship with tobacco. 72% say it was easy to get cigarettes, 64% said it was easy to get marijuana. That's a lot of availability. But here is the ultimate irony to me. The ultimate irony is that more Maine 11th graders regularly smoke marijuana than they smoke tobacco. 27% to 21%. More Maine kids are smoking marijuana than they are tobacco. I felt that anecdotally in Richmond, and it's true statewide apparently. So these implications are impossible to overstate in my view. Among Maine youth, despite decades of the harsh tactics of the war on drugs, despite decades of the evil effects of ceding the distribution and sale of marijuana to organized crime, kids are still smoking more marijuana than they are cigarettes. Now, LD1453, in the question of that, I believe, would eliminate the evil effects associated with handing this business off to the crooks. It would put them out of business. We also, which I believe, might predict that it will lead to lower rates that we have achieved with tobacco. Tobacco suppression has been a success. Marijuana suppression has not been a success. The many proven remedies in the tobacco approach include prevention programs, counseling of habitual users, prohibiting marijuana sales to minors, and keeping the price high through taxes, a very important idea that I hope we can talk about. So this LD's legalization approach also makes sense to me as a businessman. It would surely reduce the cost of law enforcement, as we have heard, and I estimate it would yield over $100 million in tax revenues in Maine annually. Over $100 million. I estimate that Maine's marijuana market is likely in a range of $200 million a year with a gross profit margin of 65%. This margin covers profits to organized crime and the high cost of distributing an illegal product. These would drop almost to zero under legalization. And much like tobacco, these economics could easily support an excise and sales tax regime of 50% or more, yielding $100 million. Indeed, I think such taxes would be needed to keep the street price high under legalization, which having a dropping price would be an undesirable effect and increase consumption. So bottom line, the business case to me is open and shut. I have some details of the arithmetic in my written testimony, but I won't go through them now in the interest of time. They're there for you to see. So briefly, I'd like to close this testimony in support of LD1453 by sharing briefly my perspective as a vestryman of St. Luke's Cathedral. Needless to say, Christians lament all forms of substance abuse and addiction. Yet Christians are also called to be cautious and deliberate in the use of force to resolve conflict. Over the centuries, this caution has resulted in the doctrine of just war. While the war on drugs was launched with the best of intentions, no doubt, by President Nixon and then Reagan, I fear, in fact I believe, it has now become an unjust war. This is a complex subject, but permit me just to comment on one tenet of the just war doctrine, that it not produce evils or disorders greater than the evil to be eliminated. That a just war not produce evils or disorders greater than those to be eliminated. Consider this disorder. In the 1960s, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala. In those years, it was a peaceful country, 60% Native Americans, the descendants of the Maya. However, it has the geographical misfortune of lying directly on the land route to smuggling drugs to the United States. As a result of the war on drugs, this beautiful country has now one of the highest homicide rates in the world, 20 times greater than a typical country, because of the demand for drugs coming to this country. Consider a second disorder, which has been mentioned, and one that as a former high school history teacher I find truly alarming. The United States has now attained the highest incarceration rate in the world, 7 times that of Canada, for example. 2.3 million Americans are in prison, the equivalent of almost 2 Maines in population. Over 60% of these prisoners are people of color. At the height of Stalin's purges, the Soviet prison system held 1 million fewer prisoners than this. The tremendous growth in our prison population mirrors the rollout of the war on drugs. Many commentators say it is the principal cause. It is hard to reconcile my vision of the land of the free and home of the brave with the reality that we are the world's biggest jailer. History has not been kind to those nations who imprison large numbers of their citizens in order to keep the peace. Members of the committee, thanks for letting me present this testimony in support of this bill. I began it with an analogy from the Maine woods. I believe that people of Maine to be practical problem solvers. If something isn't working, they try another approach. I ask your committee to support LD1453 as a way to control marijuana use. In my view and belief, it represents a different and a more promising angle of attack than the current war on drugs.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Galaudette? Representative Burns?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for the testimony and your dedication to young people in this state. Appreciate that. When I cut my wood, my wood lot.
Ever get a hanger?
I do. But I'll tell you, it's a rare occasion. Not because I'm any better at it than anybody else, but I take a lot of precaution to make sure that I scaff the tree right, and I make sure I've done everything I possibly can to know whether I'm going to fell that tree. That way I'll avoid a lot of hang-ups, which my analogy is obvious. I think we ought to walk cautiously with any of this. But I've got a couple of questions from your knowledge about the surveys. And I don't think you mentioned that. Was there a survey done with the young people as far as the use of alcohol compared to?
Yeah, we've done annual surveys for a lot of years. They used to be called the Maine Youth, MAUDAUS, something like that. And we switched over 2009 to the Integrated Health Service. They all asked the same question. And for 15 years, you know, there's been a lot of availability. Whether it's more than alcohol, less than alcohol, kind of depends on the age group that you're looking at in the year. But that being said, there's easy access for Maine kids in our state to tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana.
Okay, does that interpret to more use of marijuana than it does of alcohol by?
Well, I was talking about availability, but okay. I observed in Richmond, and the kids would tell me this, you know, we smoke marijuana and cigarettes and so on and so forth. And if you look at the 2009 data, and I use 11th graders because seniors, you know, some of them are 18 so they can buy cigarettes legally. So I looked at 11th graders, and this trend has been fairly constant since 2000. As more kids in Maine are smoking marijuana than cigarettes. I said, how nutty is that? I mean, you know, my mother died of COPD. Anybody taking smoke into their lungs, I just can't imagine it. So for some reason, the war on drugs isn't getting to young people.
But I gotta go
And
back
a
to my
tobacco
question,
use
sir.
approach, I think, is more promising.
Can you answer the question as to whether or not more of them are using pot than are using alcohol, though, based on those
Alcohol,
surveys?
no, I said cigarettes.
Yeah, but I'm asking.
Oh,
for
you
alcohol.
could. Yeah, I don't have it. It's there, the questions are there. But the question is asked and it's answered. I just didn't bring it.
You don't know what it is.
I was talking
Okay.
about tobacco.
In regard to your other stats about pot, is there a possibility in your mind as an educator that because of the negative connotation that we have placed on cigarette smoking, and rightfully so, and the mystique of the pot, that may be why a lot of kids are going for that? Because there certainly is a mystique, just as there was when I grew up, about getting illegal liquor and cigarettes at that time.
Can I re-ask your question? So you're thinking that the kind of the sizzle of smoking marijuana might be
Sure.
leading to that as opposed to the
Sure.
boring?
Whereas certainly society in general has condemned cigarette smoking
Yeah.
to a great extent.
Right. That's a great question. You know, I can't. I don't think so. That from my own experience, I think were we to, one of the things that appeals to me about LD1453, and not everything is perfect in it, but you know, we know a lot about how to suppress tobacco use, and we've been successful. And I kind of think maybe we ought to try to take that toolkit and use it with marijuana. And it's difficult to do it when it's illegal. For example, a child would never come to me as a superintendent or even the school nurse, you know, I think I have a marijuana problem. They might come and say, you know, I have an alcohol problem, or because you know, we would have to, I mean, it's a crime to admit it. So I think we have handcuffs on ourselves, you know, with this war on drugs approach to marijuana.
Well, I think I appreciate part of your answer. I guess I would agree with at least part of it about, yeah, maybe if we spent a little bit more time telling about the negative consequences instead of singing the praises of pot, we'd have less problem with it.
Well, we don't sing the praises in school, I can tell you that, and I think most.
No, but we do in society.
Yeah, maybe we do in
right here
society.
in this room.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for the speaker? If not, thank you, Mr. Galaudette.